Hello, everyone. 皆さん, konnichiwa. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. My name is Yoshi Domoto. I am the Executive Director of the Japan American Society of Georgia, and we are here to explore Japanese company attraction and recruitment in Georgia as part of our Japan American Society of Georgia and the Japan Georgia Legislative Caucus webinar series. Today, we are so thrilled to have some expert panelists from the Maxis Advisor Group, Mr. Tom Croto and Shelley Carmichael, from Georgia Power Company, Mr. Charles Stallworth, and then from the Georgia Department of Economic Development, Ms. Yumiko Nakazono. Before we get started, we'd like to thank our partners today, Taylor English Decisions, who is working with the Georgia Japan Caucus, our favorite Global and Atlanta Media Group, Global Atlanta, and the Georgia Tech Center for International Business Education and Research. But without further ado, we'd like to introduce the moderator of our program today, Mr. Al Hodge, the chair of the Japan American Society of Georgia, and also the founder and CEO of Hodge Consulting Services. Well, Al-san, yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
Good afternoon, all, and what a pleasure it is to welcome you all and an honor to host this distinguished panel. And on behalf of the Japan American Society of Georgia, we welcome you. And on behalf of the 600 plus Japanese companies in Georgia, and of course, many who do business in Japan, along with the two-way trade, great culture and education and super opportunities, we welcome you. And to jumpstart the program, it is my pleasure to introduce Yumiko Nakazono. Yumiko Nakazono is the managing director for the Georgia office in Japan and has an excellent track record, and in fact really is a legend with the types of responsibilities and the accomplishments that she's had over the years. She's very well recognized for her role in Japan, and along with us in Georgia, lots of Japanese respect, and including the other states that have offices in Japan. She has very much earned and deserved great respect. I also should point out that she has just announced, so this is almost news as it's happening, that she is retiring after more than 30 years with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And so we will miss her greatly. And so this is even more timely, and in some ways, perhaps a way to wish her well and a tribute to Yumiko Nakazono. Well, we pre-recorded a session, and that is because of the time differential. So she kindly accommodated our time. And with that, we will go directly to Yumiko Nakazono on the pre-taped message.
Thank you so much, Al-san, for your very, very kind introduction about myself. And Al-san has been one of my best friends in Georgia for a long time. And thank you for everything. And okay, let me show my slide. Okay, the first slide, it talks about what my department does, who we are. My department is marketing and sales arms of the state of Georgia. And what we do here in this list, we do attracting new business investment in Georgia, and then supporting the expansion of existing industry in Georgia, allocating new markets for Georgia companies and their product, and attracting tourists to Georgia, and promoting Georgia as a location for entertainment business and project, and workforce education and training. And next slide, this shows about my office at first. My office, which is Georgia Japan office, was opened in 1973 in Tokyo by President Jimmy Carter when he was a governor of Georgia. And he realized the importance of the connection between Georgia and Japan at the time. And Georgia was one of the few states which had an office in Japan at the time. And now we are located in the central area of Tokyo called Toranomon Minatoku. And we have 2 people. And the main mission of my office is investment promotion to attract Japanese companies to Georgia, and trade promotion to assist Georgia companies for the Japanese market. And also we work on public relations. And below this world map, this shows the international offices that my department has around the world. These green countries are our international offices. We have 12 offices now. And in Asia, we have 3, Japan, South Korea, and China. And these are Japanese flagship Japanese companies in our states. And YKK is the first Japanese companies which set up full-fledged manufacturing facilities in our states back in 1974. And since that time, there are so many Japanese companies located in our states. And I cannot show them all here in this small slide, but they are all important companies for our states. And Japan is a top-ranking investor nations in Georgia in terms of investment amount, in terms of number of facilities, and the number of employees hired by those companies, Japanese companies in Georgia. And this is a list of Japanese companies which have manufacturing plant in our states. We have over 150 manufacturing plant by Japanese companies. And then this is a Georgia map, and this shows where each of these manufacturing plant are located in our states by this orange dot. And this US map, this shows the US states which have office in Japan, like my office. These are states with star marks, they have an office in Japan. And then in Japan, we have an association called American State Offices Association. And then we work together on various kind of things to promote each of our states in Japan, such as we participate in a trade show together, and we do investment seminars or receptions. We have regular meetings, periodical meetings, and also we have a website together to promote each of our states in Japan. And this last slide, this shows statistics by the Consulate General Office of Japan in Atlanta. And they do a survey on the Japanese companies' presence in 4 states in the Southeast they cover. They do the survey every year. And this is their latest version. And as you can see, Georgia is #1 in almost all the categories, except investment amount. Alabama overtook us when Toyota Matsuda decided to locate their plant in the States about 2 years ago. But until the time, we're #1. So we had to catch up with them again.
Thank you. And so very impressive. With all of that, what attributes, what priorities in particular do you focus on when engaging Japanese companies?
Let me pick up 2 points here I'd like to talk about. First, the Japanese companies or corporate Japan, the corporate structure is bottom up, not top down. And so we should look for and go to each business division or project team in charge of the project we're looking for, instead of going to the company's top management. And in Japan, it is said that decisions are made by a group consensus rather than individual authority. So top management, they trust their people, the each project, business division, project teams, and then those people, they work throughout the entire process of the business, of the project, with their best effort and intelligence. So again, we should go to those people and establish a good relationship with them and win a trust from them and work with them throughout the entire process of the project. So this is the key points I'd like to pick up. And the second, at corporate Japan, internal consensus, internal agreement is very important. And it would take time. But Japanese company people, they're not going to be reaching out to people outside of their organization unless they can have almost complete internal consensus agreement by themselves. And even if they respond, their answers could be unclear, vague, but still, we should wait. And they're thinking about your question, what you need, seriously and sincerely, and they are working on that. So be patient and wait for them. So this is a point, second point I'd like to point out.
Well, speaking of that, what concerns and key issues, what considerations are there that we should make at the local level and the state level to support Japanese companies?
Okay. There are a couple of things that I'd like to mention here for your question. First, confidentiality. Japanese companies are very cautious and careful about their business and project confidentiality. So we should always keep in mind when we work with Japanese companies. And then we have an important partner in our states, such as Georgia Airlines, Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development Authorities. And we, my department, explain about our important partners in Georgia, which helps assist investment promotion for our states. And then explain to Japanese companies that our partners work with the same level as our department, and they keep their information confidential 100%, so they don't have to worry about it. So we explain about it to Japanese companies every time. And second point is Japanese companies, they may not express their feeling loudly, even if they have issues. But still, we should listen to them. And then they would need us to listen to them and try to solve the issue together. This kind of attitude is very important, and they would appreciate it. And then, so we should be with them and try to solve problem together with them. So we should always be that way, which is important, I think. And then third point is that, let me talk about incentives. Many people would say incentives are just a bonus, not a decisive factor for company to make a decision on location. I agree, generally. But it depends on the situation. The incentives could play an important role for company decisions. For example, if one Japanese company is looking at Tennessee and Georgia, and the candidate sites and all the other factors are mostly the same in both states. No difference. And the company is wondering which states they should choose. And then they may look at incentives from both of the states. So we should pay attention to the point. And if we think that we should get more information from companies about what they are thinking about, if we are behind the other states or not, what we should do more. So we should always ask the company for their honest opinion, their update status of the project until the last moment before it's too late. And keep working with them like that is very important, I think. So these are the points that I'd like to make for your first question, Arsan. Thank you.
We appreciate all of the information that Yumiko just provided, along with the insight. And it's clear from the map, but also just from the sheer volume of activity that this business is highly competitive. Every state wants good, solid Japanese investment, and we have to earn it every time. Well, we earn it through good public policy, through marketing, follow through, and more. And we're going to hear all of that from our distinguished panel of experts right now. And first, I will introduce Charles Stallworth. Charles is part of the team that, with Georgia Power taking the lead for an initiative many years ago, decades ago, Georgia Power established an economic development recruitment team and led the way in that era. Well, Georgia Power continues to lead the way, and Charles Stallworth is one of the reasons that it has this kind of leadership, the kinds of achievements that Georgia Power is able to bring to our state. Charles is a graduate of the University of West Florida with bachelor's in chemistry and an MBA from Georgia State. He's active in numerous state associations, and I'm happy to say he's on the board of directors for the Japan American Society of Georgia. Charles's bio, along with the other panelists, will be posted, and so I will move along and introduce Shelley Carmichael. Shelley is a graduate of Kennesaw State University, was previously with ADP in their tax division, and for the last 2 years, she's been with Maxis Advisors, along with Tom Croteau. Tom Croteau is the managing director for Maxis Advisors, and Tom is well known throughout Georgia and around the world because he was formerly the deputy commissioner for global economy and global commerce for the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And so he is a friend of all of us in this business and is also well respected. Graduated from Florida State University and also has educated many. He's been a mentor to many folks, and the Maxis Advisors scored a coup when they were able to secure Tom Croteau. So we get to hear from these three experts, both from an international perspective and domestic, from multi-state, and of course, from Georgia in great depth. And with that in mind, we're going to ask Charles first about, we just heard from Yumiko about working with and being successfully marketing with our Japanese companies and friends. What attributes do you focus on, Charles, when you are working with Japanese companies?
The first thing I want to say is thank you for the opportunity to serve on this panel. I really do appreciate it. It's an honor. And Al, you were right. Georgia Power has been involved in economic development for over 100 years. And the reason being is that our territory is only the state of Georgia. And we can't grow unless Georgia grows. So we have a vested interest to bring resources to the table to help grow the economy of Georgia. As Georgia grows, we grow. Because again, our footprint is only the state of Georgia. Now, regarding the question, as far as the attributes, it really is dependent on the industry itself, what industry sector you're looking at. Because if you're, regardless if it's Japanese or different countries or even international, it's still going to depend on the industry sector. For example, if it's a headquarter, a high-tech biopharma type project, what's going to be most important for them is going to be a pipeline of talent. And so what the partners that we unite with is the post-secondary educational systems. Georgia Tech is a huge asset for us. University of Georgia, Emory, Georgia State, they are stakeholders, and we work with them quite often as a pipeline of talent, and also for R&D opportunities for these new companies that need these skill sets. It's different from an advanced manufacturing company. For an advanced manufacturing company, we may rely on our technical colleges. They will help develop that skill set that's needed to run that plant with the technology that's out there now. And then I'll go even a step further from a logistics standpoint. You know, e-commerce is so important right now. Fulfillment centers, they have unique skill sets and unique attributes that they need as well. They need infrastructure. They need a port possibly. They need interstate. They may need rail. So it depends on what industry sector that we're working with, which really dictates what attributes and what resources that we bring to the table.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And with that in mind, you've provided a great overview, and from a state perspective, at the community level, Tom, what considerations should communities in Georgia really keep in mind when they're working with and actually are able to successfully secure a visit from a Japanese executive representing Japanese companies?
Yeah, thank you, Al. I appreciate being on the panel and the question. I feel like, you know, once we've heard from Yumiko, she is like the master, and there's not much more that we can say that you know needs to be said outside of Yumiko. She's been doing this for such a long time, and I've learned so much from her. And you know, I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to work with her. What an amazing career. What a incredible asset for Georgia and for all of us who, I bet everybody in the audience has had a chance to work with Yumiko at one point or another. But to answer your question, you know, Yumiko kind of referred to it when she said, with Japanese companies, we need to listen. And I think, you know, for communities need to realize that Japanese project is unlike any other international project, right? So if you are working with a European prospect and there is some issue perhaps that they are seeing with the site or with the incentives, whatever it is, you will probably know within the first 5 minutes what that issue is. And they're not afraid to speak up, to tell you, to negotiate directly, and, you know, all of those things. You know, same goes for some of the other, you know, countries that we see projects from in terms of Korean projects or Chinese projects or what have you. Japanese projects, I would say we need to do less talking, less selling, and much more listening and much more asking of questions. And it's really different. And if that's not done, there's a good chance that you'll get cut and you'll never even know the reason that you got cut, unfortunately. And so it really becomes something that you have to have patience, of course, always working with Japanese companies. And you need to really be involved in a consistent way with the state, with things like SUS Japan, with any missions that you can. And, you know, Al is a perfect example of that. I mean, if you want to look you know, from a community perspective of somebody who's done it the right way over, I don't know how many decades. Al's been around since, like, you know, the 1940s, I think. But if you want to do it the right way, being consistent with your presence, with your interaction in the market, with your visits to Japan, all of those things really give you a great sense of how to work with Japanese companies, how to listen, how to be a problem solver. And when Yumiko said incentives are important, they are important to solve problems. They are not a number for Japanese companies. It's not about the biggest number. It's about what is the best location and who can really partner with us like family to solve problems.
Well, thank you, Tom. That's excellent. Thank you, by the way. But specifically, thank you for the part about the listening and the less talking, and also the being able to answer questions and solve problems. Well, some of those problems you touched on are actual opportunities. How much and what type of incentives should be put on the table to solve those problems? Shelley, would you share with us your perspective about working with Japanese companies regarding incentives and what we need to remember when we put a package together for Japanese investment?
Sure. And Al, I echo Charles and Tom's comments. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I greatly appreciate the question. It's been an adventure working with Tom over the last couple of years. And, you know, I've learned so much about what's important for the Japanese companies as we work with them and the overall process. So I think I'd kind of start with just kind of echoing some of the things that Yumiko mentioned as far as the trust and credibility and working with the team. And I think most everyone on this call knows about the cultural conservative nature and risk aversion. And so Japanese companies may be a little bit hesitant to seek incentives from economic development. You know, for a couple of reasons. They may lack the expertise, the knowledge to understand really how to approach the officials. And in some cases, they might feel like negotiating for incentives might come across as disrespectful or distasteful. I think the most important thing that we can tell them as we listen and work with them as a trusted advisor is to help them understand that pursuing incentives and having incentives offered from state and local governments is very common, and it's actually expected here in the United States. As Yumiko demonstrated in talking about her approaches to recruit businesses. So it's important to let them know that it's common, it's accepted, and it is done specifically to help support a project from start to finish, not only up until the finish point initially, but also when you're looking at the long-term success of a project. Counties and states understand how important that partnership is and that long-term investment is. The projects can be extremely meaningful. And in looking at the second part of your question, you know, kind of some of the things that I think that we should remember as we're working with our Japanese partners is really to be very transparent with them and make sure that we don't assume that they understand what the US tax structure is, especially if they don't have an operation here. As we work with incentives, they can be very hard to understand if the impact of how those incentives can affect their project isn't fully understood. I think also we should, along the lines of listening and adding value, really remember when we're working with our Japanese partners to address their key concerns. What are their site development issues? What are the hurdles that they're trying to solve? Not necessarily just focus on dollar amount. Going kind of back to Tom's earlier point, how can we help them solve the problem as a partner? And what this can do is it can really help ensure the value that we're bringing to the table that can really help them offset those challenges and become a trusted advisor that we can work with them for the long haul on.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And again, I like the fact that you keep using the reference partners. because that is in fact such an important distinction with our, not unique to Japanese folks, but especially with our Japanese friends. Partnership is very, very important, being part of the same team and looking and creating win-wins for the company and the community. Well, Tom, let's step back a little bit from marketing and in the purest sense and incentives. Concerns, key issues. What types of concerns might Japanese companies have, whether it's public policy? You know, there's a lot of folks that get concerned about driver's licenses, lifestyle acclimation, and so forth. You worked for the state of Georgia in your previous role. What was your experience? And now that you have a different perspective and a broadened perspective, support structures in Georgia for Japanese companies, could you share perhaps policy-wise and programmatically about that?
Yeah, I think there are great support structures for Japanese companies, particularly in Georgia. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, what it was like working when I worked for the state versus what it's like now. And really, you know, when I was at the state, the incredible resources, you know, like Yumiko Nakazono and, you know, Joseph Hunteman and Scott McMurray and, you know, Mary Waters really understanding TPP so well, and, you know, JASG and, you know, all of our partners. I noticed that Alex Gregory is in the audience from one of the chats, and, you know, Day Lancaster, who's worked with us for so many years. All of those resources are really all around you. And I don't always have those, you know, to the extent that I used to, which I envy now. But I think the point is, for Japanese companies, you know, the real support structure starts with other Japanese companies in the marketplace. That's so important for others that have gone through it, that they can lean on to ask questions, but also to know that they're there and that they're going to be able to be around other Japanese companies as well. And you look at someplace like the Lakes at Green Valley and the incredible success that David Luckey has had down there, you know, in creating an environment that is, you know, a natural environment that's really comfortable in a home kind of way for Japanese companies, and the success with Otsuka Chemical and Rinnai and Toppan and Mitsui Kinzoku, and, you know, all of those companies that have located around each other in that environment, that you know, makes Japanese companies feel like they're home away from home. And I think Georgia does a good job of that, of being a home away from home, because of the number of Japanese companies that Georgia's been so fortunate to recruit through the years. And, you know, that has a lot to do with that consistency that I talked about. Having Yumiko in Japan for so many years without ever, you know, the state ever abandoning that office even for a year or two. And we see other states that go into that marketplace for 5 years or 8 years, and then they, you know, have a change in leadership and they go, you know, out of that marketplace for 2 or 3 years or 4, you know, before they come back in. But Georgia's been very consistent. The consistent missions from the governor, the consistency with SUSE Japan, all of those things that help create that comfort level are really part of that support structure. And for Japanese companies, I think everything is a long-term play, right? You hardly ever see a Japanese company that's just, you know, focused on the next 3 years. It's really, you know, how can we be somewhere for the next 30 years that we know is going to be the right place for us to be.
Excellent. And that long-term view is, I think, especially important for our Japanese friends. And at the same time, when you really think about it, American companies ask those same questions. But what we need to be especially positively sensitive to are those cultural cues, and to make certain that, again, I keep hearing the word listen, listening to them and responding and being proactive. Now, Georgia wonderfully has multiple years of being regarded as the #1 place in the United States in which to do business. Charles, again, you referenced Georgia Power and over 100 years in the economic development and marketing arena. Proactively, are there additional considerations that we need to have for policy development? And I guess whether that's in the realm of workforce or port or airport, I mean, what comes to mind from the policy perspective? And part of the relevance of that is that I'm happy to say we have legislators from the caucus that are tuning in today and that will also tune in later.
Yeah, Al, you made a very good point. Georgia right now, we have a very good pro-business climate. Very good pro-business climate that has enabled us to have a AAA bond rating. It's only a handful of countries, states that actually have that. That's very significant because whenever there's a capital expenditure, building a bridge, a road, or whatever, our costs of building that, or costs of that asset or whatever, because of the interest rate, it's going to be a whole lot cheaper. Our corporate income tax is 5.5%. It just went down. It's hadn't increased in over 50 years. The pro-business environment, including the regulatory issues, one-stop permitting, those regulatory issues, that pro-business, maintaining that pro-business regulatory environment and just the pro-business environment is what's so crucial. And from a business recruiter, the comment that I would say, we need to maintain that. We need to figure out a way to maintain that, because that's what's enabled us to be the #1 state in the nation for doing business for 6 consecutive years.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think more good news is on the way on the years. Well, Tom, for your perspective, Georgia legislators prioritizing, how do we make certain that we keep that leadership for Japanese investment in Georgia?
Yeah, I think I go back to consistency. I really think, doing business with Japan is not about having a home run moment all at once, whether it's, a big new incentive or, one, giant mission, that you do with, a group of 50 or 60 people. I mean, those things are nice, but what's really important is the consistency that we have in the marketplace. And I think it's a timely topic. We're not able to travel right now, so we have to find ways to be consistent and look at the value that we have by the ports, having somebody who's in Japan and, having had that person there full time for a while, and the Department of Economic Development having that presence in Japan for more than 45 years. I would say, doing a governor's mission each and every year, if not 2 visits from the governor, is critical for just keeping our presence and our level of support known. And I'm speaking like a Georgian now, even though I'm a consultant that works in several states. I can't help but speak as a Georgian. And the consistency of our outreach and our support of the Japanese companies here who are in Georgia. And I know, Pat Wilson is very fond of saying, once you have an operation in Georgia, we consider you to be a Georgia company. And that type of mentality for the state is so important, because it's not just a catchy phrase, right? It's meant very sincerely. And it's the type of message that is being extended when we're over there visiting on Japanese soil. And I think it's something that is valued when companies hear that we feel that way, that we want to stay with them. The type of work that Georgia Quick Start does with companies, where they come back every expansion and they stick with a company through a 3 or 4 or 5 year hiring ramp up. All of those things create that dependability, that long-term dependability and consistency that I think Japanese companies really love when they go to think about making investment decisions.
Excellent, excellent. Again, I like the team part of that discussion. Of course, it goes back to partnerships. And before we ask another question, we are starting to get some questions in the Q&A room. I would encourage folks to tap your Q&A button and ask your question. One of those, in fact, has just come through. And what's the best way to proactively connect with the candidates, with some of the 600 Japanese companies present in Georgia, to provide a pipeline for them? So who would like to ask that question? What's the best way to make certain that we connect with Japanese companies that are here? I will jumpstart it with the Japan America Society of Georgia. And no, I did not put that question in there, Jessica Cork. The Japan America Society of Georgia provides the perfect opportunity to interact with our Japanese friends. And a couple of you have mentioned Southeast U.S. Japan Association. Charles, share with us what that's about.
The Southeast U.S. Japan Association?
And the conference.
This suits Japan. It's every other year. Every other year, it's either here in one of the member states or it's over in Japan. And it's a great opportunity to kind of interact with Japanese companies from that standpoint. Very good opportunity. And so you can look at the schedules. I think it was in Savannah last year. But every other year, it's definitely an opportunity to kind of network in relationship with some of those Japanese companies that are there. From a community standpoint, I would even think about engaging some of the region project managers that are with the state of Georgia, or either Georgia Power or one of the other utilities, because they are well aware of the industries that are there, and they can be a tool to kind of help communities and help them from that standpoint. That would be another resource to kind of help out, in addition to Southeast Japan Association.
Excellent.
And Al, is my microphone on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, Georgia just hosted the SUSE Japan conference this past fall, I guess it was. And so that is a great environment to interact with companies, but also you have so many companies right here in Georgia, in Atlanta, that are part of the support structure that provides services to Japanese companies. We have just an amazing core of law firms and accounting firms and service providers to the Japanese community. We have cultural events here in Atlanta and throughout the state, in Macon and Savannah and in other places that give us an opportunity to interact with the Japanese community as well. So I go back to, it's not really, one at bat at the plate. It's a matter of really, broadening your network with all of these folks throughout many years that puts you in a position to interact with that pipeline.
Yeah, if I can add to that, it's really those relationships that you develop over the years. It's definitely those relationships you develop over the years.
Well, yes, and again, back to relationships and my positive bias about Japan American Society of Georgia. There are a number of events that take place through the course of the year. And of course, lately we have pivoted to the virtual conferencing, and there are several times over the last few months where we've had an opportunity to get to know each other through JASG and the chat rooms, and those are well publicized. So we encourage your membership as well for JASG. And again, relationships are so very important. Well, Shelley, a question has come through for you, which is, what are some of the biggest incentives that the state of Georgia can offer to Japanese and for that matter, other international companies from your perspective?
Sure, thank you. I'll start with that. And I may pivot that to Tom since he spent 20 plus years with that. But, you've got the difference, you really have three buckets of incentives when you think about incentives. You've got the statutory tax credits, like the Georgia Jobs Tax Credit, for example. If you add a certain number of jobs and pay the right wages and you apply, you're going to automatically get those. And then you've got what we like to refer to as statutory discretionary, where the actual benefit may be part of statute, but the amount that you receive is discretionary. And that could apply to things like training grants, et cetera. And then you've got those that are 100% discretionary, that you're just absolutely not going to get unless you go and have conversations before anything is made public. And so some examples of those could be anything from cash grants to help offset the cost of infrastructure needs that a company that is expanding or adding a new facility may have. They can be cash grants to offset the cost of training. Property tax abatements can be enormous and last over a period of many, many years. So those are just a few that I can think of, but in reality, kind of going back to my earlier point, what we want to remember when working with our Japanese partners is, let's solve the problem for what their unique needs are. What do they need with that current facility? Do they need to be close to a port? Do they need to be close to a certain interstate area? So I think that as we're working through these incentives, the few that I just named are some of the more obvious ones. As we're actually working through a project from start to finish with a Japanese business, there may be some things that are part of that process that aren't in the norm. We may be looking at money to help fund a new parking lot or lights around the building. It could be anything. And that's what I'd like to kind of start with. And Tom, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that. I imagine you would with your experience.
Well, sure. Thank you, Shelley. I think what I would add is site development, right? And so there are problems you can solve and there are incentives that you can put on the table once you have a project. But I think in particular, Japanese companies really love those sites that have been developed before they ever even get here. And, I mentioned the lakes at Green Valley having done, such a phenomenal job and having great success. But you look at, where Mitsubishi Power is in Savannah on that mega site as well. So I think any efforts, resources that communities can put into that site development, either on the front end or once you have a bird in hand prospect to help develop that site. I think, when you talk about what is the biggest incentive that you can provide, that's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind, is really giving them a great site and a great head start for their project to take those problems out of the way before they even get there.
Excellent, excellent. And perhaps that's a segue to the next question that has come through, and that's about rural communities. What can rural communities do? And I think preparedness is part of that. Who would like to address opportunities and what rural communities need to be doing to attract Japanese investment? Charles, would you like to start with that?
Sure, I can take a stab at it. I do think that it's to kind of piggyback on what Tom said. Right now, the companies that are looking to expand, they're looking to shorten their time to market. And so if some of these rural communities, if they can develop either pad-ready sites, have all the infrastructure there, all the resources there to shorten that time to market, that could really enhance their opportunities. In addition to that, years ago, there was a spec building effort where a lot of rural communities, they would build spec buildings. So again, the overall goal would be to reduce that time to market. When companies pull the trigger, they're ready to go. And anything that communities, whether rural or metro or whatever, anything that they can do to kind of decrease that time to market, that gives them a leg up. That gives them a leg up as far as moving things forward, because again, that is very important when they do pull the trigger to go forward.
Well, one of those items that I think community leaders through programs like this can learn, and legislators, is that preparedness factor and having that infrastructure ready.
Sure.
And part of it is, yes, they want to get to profitability as quickly as they can. That also means less risk.
Yes.
And the risk factor is real, no matter who the company is or where they're from. And the more the spec building is finished, or at least the pad is ready and the infrastructure is there, and the education programs are in place,
Yes.
the better off. Well, we do know that it is a competitive advantage for us to have an international charter academy with Japanese focus that folks like Jessica Cork have worked on as a leader. Here's a fun, light comment, a question. Golf. We have the Augusta National and the Masters this week, the tournament. The question has come through, where is golf in the mix with our Japanese friends? The note was, that was big in the 70s. Is it big in the 2020s?
Ooh, that's kind of a tricky question. I mean, there's no doubt, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of golf, because it really is a big thing with Japanese businessmen. And, you know, almost every state has great golf courses. Not every state has golf courses where you can play 11 months of the year. Nobody else really has something like the Masters. So Georgia really, I feel like Georgia again has a little bit of a leg up on a lot of other states in that regard. We have a lot of wonderful golf courses, some of which that are on the coast, one of which that is, quite a few that are world famous, or at least a handful that are world famous. So it is a big thing. It's a good thing to recognize. And it's a good thing to remember. And, going back to that question about rural, if I might, you do need to think about outside of your county boundaries, right? International companies in general are not really focused on your county boundaries. So you do need to look at what are the assets in your region, golf courses being one of them. You might not have the greatest golf course in your community, but I bet you've got a couple of great ones in your region. And the same thing goes with other types of assets. And I think, one of the challenges for rural communities, and this is sort of a non-traditional economic development answer, is so many of the communities around metro area have relationships with those bond attorneys and with those visa attorneys and with those Japanese construction companies and the construction companies that do business with the Japanese community. And those people are really big assets when you're working a project. And they really help create that comfort level that we talked about with Japanese companies. So if you're in a rural area, I would encourage you, you need to think about, we need to have relationships with a bond attorney that can speak Japanese, or that, that deals with Japanese companies routinely. Same thing with visa attorneys, same thing with construction companies. All of those things, you can't try and do these projects alone, right? They're complex projects, and those international businessmen and women really need to feel like they're part of an ecosystem of support.
Well, here, and I think with the Japanese business people, when they do ask the question, what else is there, can factor in. And right now, of course, Georgia has a sizzle factor with the tournament going on this week. And so there are some marketing opportunities. I also like how you both referenced think regional, act local, think regional, the old saying there, because within 45 minutes or an hour is is a driving range that they can participate, which sometimes is difficult to do in Japan. So back on point with regional and with the other assets and opportunities. Changing tracks. Here is another question, and this pertains to technology, and in this case, cybersecurity. And so there was reference about confidentiality by Nakazono-san. Charles has referenced technology companies being attracted to Georgia. This individual is a Chief Information Security Officer. And so what are we doing? What can we do in the area of cybersecurity to connect with Japanese companies and assist them with their security needs as they consider Georgia?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I would definitely reach out to the state's Department of Economic Development. They have targeted cybersecurity as one of their key industry sectors. There are individuals whose focus is primarily on cybersecurity. So that would be my starting point. I would start right there at the Georgia Department of Economic Development and get in touch with that department or that section that's focusing on cybersecurity. And they can provide some resources that can really point them in the right direction, quite honestly.
All right, okay. COVID. Question has come up about COVID and influencing Japanese companies are they asking to extend timetables to invest or build in Georgia, or are they keeping to their initial schedules? I will answer part of that, and JETRO, the Japan External Trading Organization, has recently conducted a survey of Japanese executives, and I'm very heartened. And again, this today is very timely. I'm heartened by the fact that most Japanese executives are continuing to move forward with their plans to expand in the United States, if that was already in the works, and even for new investment. There are very few, according to the survey, who have taken a pass or are inordinately delaying their timetable for decision making. Yoshi Domoto has published in the chat box that Yumiko's complete interview will be available, and she covers some of the most recent JETRO survey. So that is very good news about our Japanese friends continuing to work with and through us. Well, different question is, can panelists comment on how Georgia has differentiated itself from other areas in supporting and retaining existing Japanese companies, especially those who've been hard hit by pandemic and limits on visa? Now, I would say as well that if you go to jasg.org, the Japan American Society of Georgia website, you will see a program just like this that focused on retention and expansion for Japanese companies in Georgia. And our own Joseph Hunteman, who we congratulate, will be the next managing director in the Tokyo office for the state of Georgia, is one of the panelists, along with Melinda Lemon and others, to talk about retention and expansion. Current panelists, is there anything in particular that is of note about what communities or the state can do regarding the pandemic with our Japanese friends?
Yeah, I don't have a comment other than seek your legislator to make sure that if that is the possibility to kind of make obtaining visas a little easier, or easing some of the regulations a little easier, that may be the path to go.
And again, that's back on the risk factor.
Yes.
If they know that driver's licenses, visas, those kinds of policies and procedures in place, that means they can continue to move forward. I do know the Department of Economic Development has on its website a specific COVID policies, procedures, recommendations, and I would commend any business person to take a look at that, the Department of Economic Development site for the state of Georgia. Tom, were you about to add something?
Well, I was just going to add, you know, maybe the number one rule for communities and for all of us working with Japanese companies is be patient, right? Patience, as we all know, for anybody who's worked with Japanese companies, is absolutely critical. And they, you know, it's been my experience that they will continue to move forward, and but they will do it on a time frame that is comfortable for them internally. And I'd also like to add if I may just take 1 minute to add my congratulations to Joseph Hunteman. You know, Yumiko's little size 5 shoes are going to be really hard shoes to fill. But I will say that Joseph has worked extremely hard from the day he showed up at the Department of Economic Development. It was my pleasure to manage him. I leaned on him very heavily during, you know, many times working with Japanese companies and when we were in Japan. And I can think of no better person who is really up for the task and who is 1000% in on being the next person for the state of Georgia over there. And Georgia, once again, is very lucky to have somebody like Joseph to step into Yumiko's shoes. So congratulations, Joseph.
I truly think that is universal, isn't it, Charles?
Yeah, and I echo that as well.
Yes. Well, I tell you, that's a perfect way to conclude, only because of time, conclude this part of our program. And I do want to, of course, on behalf of Jessica Cork, our vice chair, and our previous chairs, Alex Gregory has tuned in. Tom Yamamoto has tuned in. And then we have some great folks from Statesboro and Savannah and other parts of the state, in addition to Metro Atlanta, that have tuned in today. So we thank you all for being here. And most especially, we thank our panelists. And with that in mind, we back to partnering. We have a great partner with Taylor English Decisions, and Daraka Sacher is on the program with us. And Daraka, if I may toss to you, we appreciate your partnership, and of course the Japan-Georgia caucus, which is so very important. But again, to everybody that participated, we thank you. We will do a quiet clap for each of you. And Daraka, I'll turn control to you, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Al, and I'll be brief because we're bumping up against time. But definitely want to thank all the panelists and you, Al, for I think it was a very informative program here. So I'm here, I'm with Taylor English Decisions, but I'm here in my capacity as coordinator of the Georgia-Japan Legislative Caucus, which is basically what it sounds like. It is a caucus of state legislators that are interested in Japan and our relationship with Japan. And I think they've kind of collectively raised their hands to be a part of this conversation when it comes to attracting and retaining Japanese companies. And so that we've been doing that for a couple of years now, and I think we found some success. But the point is that it's a team effort here, and I think everybody here has kind of notated that fact. You know, I like to kind of reiterate, this conversation was not theoretical. This is about economic development. This is about job creation. This is not a conversation just for those who are interested in Japan or can speak Japanese or whatever. This is about some real returns to our state. And I have to hyper emphasize that because a lot of times folks just think that this is kind of a segmented, siloed conversation that we're having here. It is not at all. This is, regardless of whether you're interested in the culture or anything of that nature, we have a very long-lasting, very important economic relationship with Japan. And we want to do our part to increase that in terms of economic development and job creation. So that's what all of this is, all of these efforts that we're participating in. It is for the purpose of broadening that relationship and making Georgia a place, even more so than it is now, a place where Japanese companies can come and feel comfortable here. And that, to the point about the legislators, the reason why they are interested in that, if I may so speak for them, in a sense, is because when those companies come to their districts, that is jobs for their constituents. And that's very important here because that goes to livelihood, obviously. So I'm glad that this partnership has led to kind of a broadening of this conversation because it's very important. And I'm glad that we have so many great people that have been working on this for so long. I'm relatively new to this conversation, but we're going to keep pushing and we're going to keep developing, and I'm pretty competitive here. So I'm pretty hardcore about maintaining Georgia where it is and even getting it to higher heights when it comes to competing against our friendly state neighbors and even those that are further on the West Coast. So I'm really excited about what we can do with the help of all these folks that are involved, on this panel and in other conversations. So with that, I'm gonna let folks go, but I will let you all also know that we're going to be doing more of these and having deeper conversations, so you all can learn more about how you can be a part of this and be a part of this this effort and this initiative. So you'll hear from us again, and we look forward to having the conversation. So with that, thank you all, and hope you have a good rest of the day. And I hope you appreciated not having to talk politics for 5 hours. So, all right. Thank you very much.